This podcast is brought to you by Knowledge at Wharton. For more information, please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu.
So in general, in any sort of competition, if you're a sports team, let's say you're a basketball team trying to win a game, or you're a group of employees trying to win a competition, your group of kids trying to win your school book drive, something like that. In general, in any sort of competition, it's good to be ahead if you want to win. So the more points you're ahead in basketball, the more dollars you've raised towards your goal, whatever it is, the further along you are, the more likely you are to beat your competitors. So take sports, for example. So you wanted to look at NCAA basketball. In general, teams that are 4 points up at halftime, they win about 60% of the time. Teams that are 8 points up at halftime, they win 80% of the time. And so in general, the more you're ahead, the more likely you'll be to win. But what we looked at in this paper is whether losing along the way could actually be a good thing. Being behind someone else could actually help you to be more likely to win. And so what we found actually is that basketball teams, as one example, that are slightly behind at halftime are actually more likely than their opponents to win. So you might think that a team down by 1 should lose or win less than 50% of their games, right? The team that's up by 1 should win. But we actually find the opposite. Teams that are down by 1 are actually more likely to win. And in general, they're about 5 to 7% more likely than you'd expect by chance. And the reason is motivation. So we can always, we can all think of examples where we've been a little bit behind a goal, something we really, really wanted. We almost got there, but we just didn't get there. And that's exactly what's going on in this. So being close to winning, right? Being close to winning at halftime, but not quite there is very motivating. And so what we look at is we also look at what happens at the beginning of the second half. So you've been in the locker room, you're down by 1. How does that change how you might come out? And what we show is that you come out a lot stronger. You work a lot harder, you score a lot more in those first couple minutes after halftime. And what we also find similarly is if you just bring people into a laboratory and you say, okay, have them do a little task, they're pressing buttons on the computer, and you tell them they're going to be competing against someone else in the room, and you never show them that person, but you give them feedback halfway through the task how they're doing. Half the people you tell, you know what, you're almost there, but you're just a little bit behind. And the other half the people say, oh, you're beating your opponent. What we find is that in the second half of that task, people work harder. They pass those keys faster. They press them very hard when they've been behind. And so being behind just a little bit can actually encourage people to work harder. Sure. So let's say you're a manager and you have a group of employees and you guys are competing against another group, another company for a government contract. Right, so maybe you're Boeing and you're competing against another company for an airline, building a bunch of airliners for a government or the military, or you're some other competition. You want to figure out how to motivate those employees. How are you going to get them to work harder, and how are you going to get them to be more likely to win that competition? And so one thing this research suggests is that you want to be very strategic about the way you do that. So one thing you can do is take breaks strategically. So you could, first of all, you could tell your employees that they're a little bit behind. But you could also, right, you say, oh, guys, we got to work harder. Those guys, they're barely beating us. They're 2 weeks ahead of us. We're behind. But you could also take breaks when you take stock of the progress at times when you guys are a little bit behind. So rather than actually giving your employees false feedback, just pick a metric or take a break at a time or look at the metrics in ways that make your team, your employees, feel like they're not too far behind. You don't want to make them think that, oh, we're so far back that we can't do it. But we're just a little bit, we're almost there, but we're just not quite. We just have to work a little bit harder. And what this research shows is that when people feel like they're that just a little bit behind, they're going to work harder, and that's going to make them more likely to succeed in the long run.
For more business news and analysis from Knowledge at Wharton, please visit knowledge.wharton.upenn.edu.